Hey, welcome to another episode of Conversations with Beer Bloggers. Today we meet Bryan Roth from the This Is Why I'm Drunk blog. Cheers. Bryan, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be a part of it.
Yeah. So first off, how did you get into craft beer?
It's a good question. I think, in all honesty, it was probably not very different than a lot of people. I drank really lousy beer when I was in high school, and I was lucky enough to have a friend who was older than I was. And so when he started drinking beer, he only wanted to drink good beer. And I very gladly followed suit. It was kind of the normal run-of-the-mill, Keystone, Miller, whatever my friends could get our hands on. But when I started drinking with my friend, it was at the time, I guess it was kind of the high end, considering how far we've come in the craft beer movement in the last few years. But Hoegaarden and Guinness, and those were the two that I definitely remember the most. It was just one of those things where we went. So I grew up in upstate New York, and so Wegmans, which is very big in the Northeast and coming down south a little bit, they had a pretty decent beer selection. So he would go in, just kind of pick whatever looked good, and that would be what we would drink. And it was all really good beer, and it was never a case where we'd be partying and going crazy or anything like that. It was a case where, for the first time when he started drinking, it was a case where we just wanted to enjoy what we were having. So that was really easy. In all honesty, it probably wasn't until about 2007 until I started really getting interested in what craft beer was and what you could do with it. And I have it's kind of, I use this in a broad term, my mission statement that I have on the blog about why I love beer, and I explain it that I read a New Yorker article that was profiling Sam Calagione from Dogfish Head. Mm-hmm. And up until then, I had been just kind of a generic craft beer drinker, picking up Dogfish Head was something I had drank before, and, Sam Adams, just really easy stuff like that. But after reading that piece, it just blew me away. The effort and the dedication that he would put into the beer that he made. And I remember vividly the start of this piece is him traveling into, I think it was an Amazonian forest, to find the wood that he would use for the Palo Santo beer. And so the author's describing it as they go into this forest, and his guide wants to show him how hard this bark is. He pulls out a gun and he shoots the tree, and the bullet stops dead in the tree. And then they describe, and then they're going to use this wood to make a beer. And I just thought that is so cool that you could do that. And I've been really lucky to live in North Carolina the last 5 years, where not long before I moved here, the state had passed a pop the cap law, which allowed higher alcohol content beers to be sold. And so just in the last few years, it's been this explosion of breweries, almost to probably a nationwide attention level. And North Carolina has really kind of become this great epicenter for a craft beer movement in the South. And so it's benefited me because I've been in the middle of all this, being able to kind of absorb it all while everything else is going on all around the country. And so I feel like that's just scratching the surface, but that's kind of the big points, I think, of what really kind of got me into beer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember watching Beer Wars, and Sam from Dogfish in there. I mean, it just gives you a completely new appreciation for beer, watching him talk about beer.
It was incredible. I mean, it was one of those things where you get a sense for reading about what they do. But then, when you see him going out into the middle of the desert to set a petri dish to collect the wild yeast that they can use in their Asian Ale series, it's just really, really cool. And I feel like while a lot of craft brewers might not have the resources or the ability to do something like that to that extent, one of the things that I love about it is just the fact that all the same, that innovation is still there across the board from anybody. Even if they can't travel to Egypt, they're still doing a hell of a lot just in their little niche market, and that's one of the things I love about it.
Yeah. So how did you get into blogging then?
So I've been a writer by trade for a long time. I worked in newspapers before I came down to North Carolina, and I worked for a communications office at Duke University. And so all the writing that I've done has essentially just been journalistic styles, news, kind of straight news, inverted pyramid, who, what, where, when, why. My exposure to writing for fun, aside from the fun and pleasure I get out of that kind of writing, has been limited. I haven't really had a lot of chances to just kind of go crazy on my own, just write about what I wanted to. And so I started the blog as a way simply to just track the things that would pop up in my head as I had my beers. In all honesty, I just wanted it to be kind of a straight log of the beers that I had. So if I wanted to go back and remember, oh, I had such and such a beer, here's what I thought. And so when I started the blog, the fall of 2011, it was just straight reviews. And it was spurred because a friend of mine from college on Facebook, he started a photo gallery on Facebook of "This is why I'm fat." And so he would take pictures of these amazing meals that he would create, or a restaurant that he went to. And I thought, okay, well, I can kind of do that. So I started sharing pictures. This is why I'm drunk, where I would take pictures of the beer that I would have and pair them with specific foods. And so he asked me about, well, do you write anything about them? And I thought, well, I guess I could. And so I did. So I started the blog, just a regular old free WordPress site. The name just came from playing off, having a little fun off of it, really. The evolution of it has been kind of strange for the way that, I just wanted to be just strictly me writing about these beers that I've had. But I found that the more I've paid attention to what I'm drinking, how it's made, and what interests me about it, that was really kind of pushed me into expanding my writing and learning more about the beer industry. It's been a big part of my home brewing. And just, it's really funny, I guess, the way that it just started as me thinking of a way that I can track my thoughts, and just exploded into this whole thing where now I'm thinking about the beer industry and business and why people do the things they do. And it's been a very strange journey to get here, I guess.
Yeah, I really enjoy your content on what you think about the beer business and beer industry and just the way things change. So you're a home brewer too. How long you've been doing that?
So I started years ago. A friend of mine here in Durham was a home brewer as well, and I kept on running into him at beer festivals in the area. And so it was like the third or fourth time we saw each other, we recognized each other and we'd say hello. And the third or fourth time he asked me if I wanted to come over for a brew day, and I thought, why not? This could be fun. And so I went over and I did. He's an all grain brewer, and so it was a very intense exposure to the whole process. He'd make 5-gallon batches all grain, and so I went over and I just kind of hung out and tried to stay out of the way and helped where I could with lifting things, essentially, because I didn't want to screw anything up. But he's the one who got me into it. I bought an all-grain batch kit to do with him, using his equipment, so I could just get into the process of trying it on my own. And then it was probably about October or so of, I guess, about 2011. I bought my own starter kit from Northern Homebrewer, and I've been brewing ever since. It was a very crazy first year. I went a little bit above and beyond what I probably should have done. I think I probably made 10 or 11 batches. And I ran out of space very, very quickly. But I do strictly ales. I don't have any of the equipment to handle temperature control. So I just do extract brewing, steeping grains. I did a lot of, I guess, experimental beers to kind of play off of just ideas I had. I did some fruit wheat beers. One of the first ones I did was after I had a 21st Amendment Hell or High Watermelon. I thought, this is pretty good, but I could probably do a little bit better, because I'm thinking if there's a watermelon on the name, I want it to really taste like watermelon. So I made a watermelon wheat just a regular base wheat recipe, and then I ended up using probably about 3 watermelons worth of juice and pulp, and the thing just tasted like boozy watermelon, which was awesome to me. But depending on your taste, like some people said it tasted too much like watermelon, some people said it tasted too little like watermelon, but I liked it, and that's what counted.
Yeah. I was out in San Francisco.
I'm done.
I was out in San Francisco last year, and I went to 21st Amendment, and they serve Hell or High watermelon with a watermelon wedge in the glass.
Yeah, I can get behind that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So
there's a place, Boston Beer Works, stations in the city, and then also they're in Logan Airport too. They do the same thing. They have a watermelon wheat beer. Where it was I think it was the first time I'd ever had one. This was years even before I had 21st Amendments, where, I got the Pilsner glass with a giant hunk of watermelon right in it. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's kind of neat that they can do this. So I'm glad that I at least got to try my hands on it as well.
Yeah. So the six-pack project, you just started that. Can you tell a little bit about it?
Yeah. So this was something that came about. I had written a post on the blog about what people assume local to be as it relates to beer. There were a lot of studies that I found that related specifically to food, because obviously that's a really big thing. With farmers markets have grown exponentially in the last few years, and so I was looking at information about that where people had this wide range meant to them. It could be anything from something that was made down the street to something that was made 100 miles away. And so I thought that it was really interesting, particularly how it relates to the craft beer movement, because it seems like everybody has or is getting a neighborhood brewery now. And so I wrote this post, and I was thinking about it afterward about, well, if someone wanted to come to visit me and they said they wanted good local beer, what would I do? What would that mean to give them that? And so I got this idea of the six-pack project, where if somebody came to visit me and I wanted to give them 6 of the beers I thought best represented what North Carolina had to offer in the beer world, what would I do with them? And I should also I was alerted to this after the fact. There was something similar that Billy Boris out in Colorado did.
Yep.
And Chad, I didn't want to forget his last name, Chad Lothian up in Maine. He writes a blog, If My Coaster Could Talk, and I forget, someone had alerted me that they had kind of did a similar thing, so which is really cool. And so I wanted to bring other people on board with the idea that obviously it's not just me who could come up with great things to do. So because one of the things that I love to do, especially when I travel, is find the best places to go buy beer, drink beer, and all of that. So the six-pack project was an effort to try to bring together people from all over the country to highlight these various six-packs from states where, if you're traveling or if you're just passing through, what would you want to look for? Because I feel like if you go online to even Beer Advocate or the Reddit beer threads, people are constantly saying, I'm going here, what should I look for, or where should I buy it? And not necessarily do I want my blog to be a clearinghouse of information, but I just think that if it's a case that we start building this web of people connecting and sharing this kind of information, then it's just a really great way to share these individualized thoughts of what's going to be good, especially in a case where at a time when there's new places popping up all the time, there's a constant variety of what to choose from. And so one of the aspects of the six-pack project being that it has to be bottled, and it has to preferably not be seasonal. So that way, if you're traveling to Kentucky, you know exactly what to look for and that you can get it and take it to. And so I just thought of this, and what would blogging not be if it weren't to try to be social? So it worked out really well. We've got a couple rounds down, so we've got 12 states covered, with hopefully many more to go. Not just states, but also trying to maybe highlight other regions of the world or what people can find in the U.S. It just seemed like a really cool way to try to pay it forward a little bit.
Yeah. So do you have any plans for your blog or anything coming up, anything in the works?
nothing to doing now. In all honesty, it's been nice. I've gotten to a really nice groove where I've been consistent for the most part about trying to do a few posts a week. For the most part, the amount of time that I'm spending on it may range between maybe 4 or 5 hours a week, between either writing or researching or creating graphics or something like that. And so I really kind of enjoy what I'm doing because I feel like there's a lot of people do a really great job with content for beer reviews, some of which I do, but in all honesty, it kind of harks back to what I was trying to do in the first place. I'm just trying to write stuff that I think is interesting to me and keep my fingers crossed that other people like it too. And so that's what's led me to a lot of the posts dealing with like looking at the beer industry, or with the local posts, trying to get an idea for what local would mean when it comes to beer and when it comes to what people think of it. I was working on a post today about international sales. Craft beer specifically has seen monumental growth in the last couple of years when it comes to selling beyond America's borders. Coincidentally, so has big beer too. Budweiser has done really, really well abroad, but the big difference being that they have lots of money to help push that kind of thing. And so stuff like that is that the way I came to it was I saw that Budweiser they had come to an agreement with Rihanna to be a spokesperson for them, and they're going to do this big concert series with Jay-Z and Rihanna. And so I read that and I'm thinking, okay, well, why is this exactly? So I started looking into international beer sales, and you see that craft beer internationally is going really high, but so is Bud. And certainly there's tons of places and tons of people that you can interact with to try to sell your beer. But as macro beer sales are declining in the U.S., they have to go somewhere else. And so now Budweiser, 44% of their total sales come from outside of the United States now. And so it's a case where they, at least in my view, they're trying to make up for that with something like this, where you hire a global superstar compared to, say, Sam Adams or Dogfish Head, if they can sell stuff abroad in Canada or England. A lot of what I'm doing right now is just finding interesting stories online and then just trying to make these connections in my head and seeing where it takes me.
Yeah. So where can people find you? Like your website, your Twitter account? Do you have anything else?
Yeah, sure. So I've got, so the website is thisiswhyi'mdrunk.wordpress.com. And then I'm on Twitter at Bryan D. Roth, really easy. If you feel so inclined, I'm also on Instagram at Bryan D. Roth. That's not strictly beer. That's just kind of whatever. I posted a picture of one of my cats recently. It's in my profile says it pretty straightforward that I love beer. I'm a fake amateur photographer and I'm cat fancy, which pretty much sums it up very nicely. Those are the main places to catch me, really. I'm always on Twitter, and I love chatting with people. Andy Roth is always the best way to get a hold of me.
Right, yeah. I mean, whenever I get on Twitter, I always know, or generally know that you're there.
I have to fill my time somehow while I'm at work, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Cheers. And,
Thank you.
Thanks.